Welcome to another episode of the IBC Guys. It's a big day today for two reasons. Well, three reasons, I should say. The third reason is we got a cool podcast for you today. But let's get to the first two. The first reason, Mike Stevens. Got a call last night. He called me, tell me a story. So to make a long story short, he bought his first pair of Jordans last night. So I wish he could have seen. We were just talking on the phone. I wish he could have seen my smile. Told him it opened the door now. He's going to be a sneakerhead. We're going to be talking sneakers all the time. So we got a podcast scheduled coming up here together. So I'm going to ask him about his first pair of Jordans. Anyway, that's the first real good piece of news. The second one, it's kind of cool that it falls on today, but today is the 2-year anniversary of me leaving my W-2. So November 17th, 2023 was my official contract end date in the public school system. And we just kicked off doing land business. So IBC has been a passion project since then, but back 2 years ago, the land business was able to support our family and it's provided freedom. I think I've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast, but my kids think it's weird when both of their parents don't come on field trips. Um, that kind of stuff. We drive them together to school every morning. So mom prays in the seat while I'm driving, that kind of stuff. So it's offered us a lot of freedom. I don't know why the Lord chose us to do that, but hopefully we steward what we're given well. But yeah, it's been 2 years since that happened, and a lot has happened since then. We've chosen certainly to ride the roller coaster that we've been put on, but it's a really cool thing. And Mike was a part of that too. He was an encouragement. So I sent him a text this morning thanking him. So this is maybe the formal addressing of that. He was maybe a kick in the pants, if I can say that, to get out of my W-2, and then has been a support along the way as well. But it's kind of cool. It's been 2 years. Hopefully there's at least two more, if not tons more. But enjoying what we're doing right now in the land business and certainly enjoying helping people with IBC. So that brings us to the goal today, or the topic today. Last week we did a topic on Kyle Busch, and a lot more since that episode has come out, or a lot more has come out since we did that episode. I said that poorly. In terms of what Kyle and his family actually did in terms of their policies versus how those policies were built, analysis have gotten into it a bit more, dug a little deeper. It's going to be interesting for the weirdos like me to see how that comes out. But it's certainly all over the news. Certainly not trying to dog anybody. It's a widespread thing, but it has been a hot topic of conversation around insurance people. So curious to see how that comes out. I'm not going to spend any time on the newly developed stuff today. You're welcome to jump on and look for that. You certainly, if you just Google it, you'll find it if that's of interest to you. But today we're going to try and kind of do the opposite of that. So we had a famous person that worked through a permanent policy that maybe didn't go so well. And they're, again, suing a life insurance agency to the complete opposite. So swing the pendulum the other way. And if you've read the title, Walt Disney actually used a life insurance policy. He leveraged the cash value, just like we talk about and discuss on our podcast. He did that to start Disney World. So that's what we're going to talk about today and talk about kind of how we did that, the ins and outs. So again, I'm just trying to not necessarily be dichotomous. It's not just one or the two, or it's good or bad, but trying to give the positive for a famous person. So let's take two famous people, see how they're using it. We've kind of done that a little bit with the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. If you have not read the book, What Would the Rockefellers Do by Garrett Gunderson. It is a quick, easy read. I would highly recommend it. It talks a lot more about the theory of the infinite banking concept, and much less about the details of how it works. So if you're looking for kind of an introductory book, I would highly recommend that one. In fact, that's the one I recommend to everybody. Is What Would the Rockefellers Do? But kind of along those same lines, to look at a famous person that maybe did it well, today, and then last week we did a famous person that maybe didn't do so well. And that there's always two sides to the coin. So take that for what it's worth. But we're going to spend our time talking about how Walt Disney leveraged his today. But before we get into all that, got to do the podcasty stuff. We do exist for exactly that, to provide information about the infinite banking concept, to get it out there, to have you have the information as much as you can get to feel comfortable to then make a decision for your family. And as I do this more and more, I do it every day. I talk to at least someone every day about it. Excited to kind of share a conversation I had today. But the more and more I learn about this, it's all about comfortability. So it's certainly not about knowing every detail. Some people do that, and that's their comfort level. It takes them a long, long time. I would probably put myself in that as that qualifier, where it took me about a year to wrap my mind around it. Took Mike 6 months. He's much smarter than I am. I've talked with guys that it takes them 3 days. They read through it real quick. Yep, this works for me. And there's people who've taken years. Um, so wherever your comfort level lies, our goal is just to give you information so you can make an informed decision. With that information is goal number two, to give you implementable, actionable examples that you can use. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. Obviously, Walt Disney, starting Disney World. My guess is you're likely not looking to do that, start your own amusement park, but the applications are still there. The parallels in those applications are still there. So we'll talk through that a little bit today. And then third is to get it out to as many people as we can, the information about IBC. So if you would share, like, subscribe, it really does help. I know every podcast asks you to do it. Um, so I'm no different. The goal is to get the information out there. My goal is not to make a bunch of money. That's not my goal. So it may vary a little bit, but the goal is to spread the word. And if you could help out in that way, in that capacity, it would be much appreciated. All right. Oh, phone number 507 205 2284. I think I may have it memorized at this point. So if you listened, I never have it memorized. I just got that one. So I'm really happy. I did check. I did look to make sure I had it correct. 507 205 2284. I'm pretty sure that's what I said, but that's the phone number. If you text or call that, either Mike or I'll answer it. So feel free to do that. And then my email is dave@familybankingsolutions.com, and Mike's is Family Banking Solutions. Mike@familybankingsolutions.com. I can see my dog drinking out of the toilet in the background. So that is a huge rabbit trail, but the bathroom door is open. He must not have any water in his bowl. So, hey, we're living life here at the Parmley household. Um, I digress very quickly, but let's jump into it today here. So again, Walt Disney. So the goal is kind of setting it up. Famous person, maybe didn't do it so well. Famous person that did use it as well as they could have. So I think I mentioned he leveraged the cash value in a life insurance policy. And this is confirmed. You can look it up. Again, Google it. I'll put some sources. I got three different sources that I kind of took from each respective one to kind of put a history, a timeline in it together from those three. So you're welcome to look it up and read it. But essentially, and I'll get into this a little bit more, he needed some liquid assets, some liquid money. So he leveraged his insurance policy to do that. So again, we'll talk about that in the timeline. But essentially, what my goal is to kind of talk through how did Walt Disney leverage his assets, and what does that look like in terms of being liquid, so the liquidity of those assets, the control and the use. So kind of clue the control, liquidity, and usage, instead of going through a traditional bank. So what did that look like in terms of Walt Disney? And then maybe some key takeaways at the end. So again, we want to do what Walt Disney did in leverage his cash value. So there are parallels to this before we get into the story. I talk about it quite often in my land business, running what we make. I think initially in the podcasts, one thing Mike has worked with me, we take like investor money, put in our policy, and then go leverage it in our land business, which is absolutely what I should be doing. But what we were doing a poor job of was paying ourselves back. We've gotten better at that. We got a consistent flow going that way. So what we do is we just keep it in the land business and we'd have it, churn over. Well, there may be a month or two where that money was kind of sitting there. We call it our land account to be used to buy land. Well, if opportunities didn't come up, it's just sitting there. So rather than have it sit there, we're putting it back in the policy. It's decreasing the drag, is what we call it. So it's making money more efficiently and then leveraging it that way. So I have gotten better at that. But I go down that path because we are leveraging it. The parallels here, it doesn't have to be an amusement park. It can absolutely be your land business. Um, Talked with someone today. I'll probably talk a little bit more because it's on my mind. But what they have done is they felt a calling to turn their garage into a very nice salon, but to specifically target those who may have sensory issues or special needs or something like that, and do it as a ministry, which I think is really cool. My wife is a former special ed teacher. She worked with students with autism for years down in the inner city in St. Petersburg, Florida. So if you've been down that way, you know that's kind of a tougher spot to grow up. So she has a heart for that. So she's kind of I'm certainly not to the level she is, but she's taught me to have a heart for that same stuff. So those kind of stories are really cool. But to leverage IBC, we kind of talk through what that looked like. So it's just kind of fun to hear how IBC can be used in different capacities. Um, so really just to know that these IBC policies they're a tool in terms of the life insurance rather than just strictly a death benefit. Yes, we run them through life insurance, not just a death benefit. It's a tool to build that control, liquidity, and usage. So, all right, let's get to the story. I just did bullet points. Again, I pieced this together from different sources. So feel free to go look it up, fact check me. In my doctoral studies, we had to do that all the time. We could never take anybody's word for it. Really, what they wanted is for me not to say anything. They wanted everybody else's word, but then I had to check all those other people's words and referee journals and all that kind of stuff. So feel free to do that if you're into that kind of thing. But like I said, I'll put my sources in the show notes. You're welcome to just click on them and look at them there. But in the early 1950s, Walt Disney could not find uh, sourcing or money sources to start his amusement park. The kind of the articles kind of talked about he like going to a state fair. There was maybe some things going on there that families wouldn't want to happen. To give you an example, alcohol was served at state fairs. Walt Disney didn't. He wanted to start an amusement park where families could go, and that wasn't a concern. He wanted to obviously showcase, Mickey Mouse and his characters and things like that. If I remember correctly, Bambi had just come out, so they wanted to leverage, the momentum from that. But he couldn't find any financing. People thought it was a crazy idea. No one would want to go to this place. One, there's no there's no alcohol. Keep dad's sanity. But two, lots of other reasons. He wanted a lot of money to do it, obviously, to buy land in Orlando. Um, who knows what that land's worth at this point. But yeah, to get the park up and running, all that kind of stuff. So he had to fund it. His money guy said the bank's got to see some skin in the game. You got to do something. Well, he didn't have a lot to his name. He just spent a whole bunch on getting these movies up and going. Bambi and what was the other one? Sleeping Beauty. Those two they'd run over budget. So what he did is he took a $60,000 loan against his life insurance policy. So Commerce Bank, I find it interesting. Commerce Bank has a big article on this. I've never heard of Commerce Bank. I don't know how well known they are, but if it's got to do with Walt Disney and your company, you're going to plaster that as much as you can. So they have a dedicated page on their website to this story. But they leveraged, so Walt Disney and his wife Lillian took out a $60,000 loan against his insurance policy to go do exactly what the money man said he needed to do. We needed to have some skin in the game, some liquid assets. So he did exactly what we described to, is in your best interest in IBC. This is not an investment. IBC is not a place to just have your money sit and make a bunch of money. It will continue to make money on that ledger. Absolutely 100% correct. But the goal is to then leverage that money to go make money other places, to pay your bills. And as you replenish that, as you pay yourself back, that ledger, there's never a subtraction sign. It will continue to grow every year over time for the extent that person, so the insured person is alive. So let's say it's 30 years, and you do $10,000 a year. At the end of those 30 years, you have $300,000 on that ledger, making you a contractual guaranteed internal rate of return, even though you've been allowed to leverage that, the control liquidity and usage. So that's what he did. He took that $60,000 out. The policy was still in place, just the same as with IBC. He didn't lose the policy. He borrowed against the cash value. And in the first year, it was a giant success, and he was easily able to repay it. Policy remained, intact, and he had his amusement park up and running. Another thing that I took out of this was banks at that time were charging around 6% to use their money, which doesn't seem crazy. I borrowed a much higher rate from private investors. But at that time, back in what, early 50s, 1954 is the number I have on here. Commerce Bank was allowing him to use the cash value loan, again, the collateral and the death benefit, allowing him to use it at 2%. So not only was he able to liquefy some asset, that asset being the insurance policy, but as he was able to do it at a much lower rate. So what, 1/3 of the rate that the banks were charging. So yes, he did get charged at 2% interest, but he had it. He could leverage that asset, go do with it what he wanted to, and then the time that was out was only costing him 2% versus the 6%. So another way to say that, it would have been, what, 200% more if my math's correct. Is that right? 300% more? I don't know, one of those two. Compared, what the bank would have charged him compared to what the insurance company was going to charge him. So all that, just to sum up, I put why this matters. The loan provided him real capital to fund his dream, and he was willing to show that he believed in it so much he was willing to do it. So I think a lot of people have causes. I mean, your family is a cause that I would qualify as a passion and a dream. Most people want what's best. I would say 99% of people want what's best for their family. So to leverage your cash value to go, pay for your daughter's dance classes, to take your son hunting. I mean, these are all things that we do with our family. Have your kid play travel baseball, to do those things, but then to have that money continue to make money on the ledger. You could go use it and then pay it back. That money never leaves that ledger, and it will contractually grow and grow and grow and grow over the course of 20, 30 years. So again, not a get rich quick scheme. That is not what IBC is. It is not an investment. It is a way to monetize money you're already going to spend. So monetize means you're making money off money you're going to spend anyway. Walt Disney did that, and it's just kind of a famous example of him doing that. So again, jumping back, why was this the right choice? Kind of put some bullet points in here. The policy continued to build over time. I alluded to it earlier. So Walt Disney's policies remained intact. His policy, even though he leveraged with $60,000 to go start Disney World, his policy remained intact, and his cash value accumulation continued. So again, it's contractual. These permanent policies, they will continue to make money even though you've borrowed against the cash value to go do what you were going to do anyway. So that's an important. That's why it was the correct tool. The predictability was a good tool. The 2%, that does fluctuate, and I assume it did back in the 50s as well. But my guess, let's say it fluctuated at 1% from the 2%, he's still paying half. And percentage can sometimes, Mike would describe percentages. The interest rate's always the distraction. It's the totality of it. And I would agree with that, but there's some importance to it as well. So if he's paying half the amount of interest, that's a big deal. And $60,000 back in the 50s is worth who knows how much today. $1,000,000? I don't know. I don't know what inflation has done, but it's a substantial amount of money that he took out against that insurance policy. But there's a lot of predictability to it, and add in the fact that it's continuing to make that internal rate of return, even though he's gone and used it. There's a lot of predictability there. You don't get that in the stock market. You don't get that investment index or crypto or whatever. I mean, crypto, the fluctuations are crazy. I'm not built for that stuff. But it provided him control. He got to use and leverage the asset in the way that he wanted. He wanted to start this. The banks were not going to give him the money he needed. So he put some skin in the game to show how serious he was. He needed that liquid asset. It gave him the control to do that. But lastly, I put down here, it kept his legacy in place. So the insurance policy remained. My guess is, I don't know this, it didn't say this in the articles. This is just Dave stipulating here. But my guess is his beneficiary was his wife, Lillian. So they probably had a conversation. Lillian's like, I want this thing to be in place if something's going to happen to you. Well, because he leveraged the cash flow, that has nothing to do with the viability of the policy that remained in place and his legacy. The death benefit was still in force, even if he would have died with the $60,000 out in Disney World. His legacy was remained in place, and I've shared so many times in this podcast. The thing that gets me going, the thing that gets my engine running the most, is talking about legacy for your kids and your grandkids. I had a conversation on Saturday with a friend couple talking about IBC. They have policies, but they were like, well, what do we do next? And my first suggestion is you need to get your kids insured. And we talked through what that looked like, but not only what it looked like, but what the benefits would be. You give your kid a policy. So again, we started with my kids. My daughter's 11. In 30 years, she'll be 41. But if that policy has 30 years to mature, there is going to be a substantial amount of cash value coming off that thing. And it's going to be, because my daughter's the insured, it's going to be in force until she dies. And then the death benefit will either go to her husband or my grandkids, which, man, talk about starting something now that's going to impact your grandkids. And let's say another 30 years and 60 years, they will know who their grandpa is. Not that most people don't know their grandpa, but they'll hopefully have a special appreciation for that. And that's something I'll, work with my daughter on. Um, More because it's biblical, not because I want my legacy to remain intact. But go back to Proverbs, and blesses the man who leaves inheritance for his children's children. I think it's, not speaking directly to IBC, but I think IBC fits into that biblical verse very, very well. So spending too much time on that, but Walt Disney kept his legacy in place. Um, so drawing comparisons. One thing that came to mind, Disney is a behemoth. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily agree with the direction Disney has gone in terms of their political stance and influence, and I understand all that. It's hard to argue. I think they did 9 point some $billion last year in revenue. It's a lot of money. So they're a behemoth. They leveraged it from the start, and if they did it from the start, they're doing it now. But banks do it. So BOLI is a very well known. So BOLI is BOLI. It's an acronym for Bank Owned Life Insurance. And we've talked about this. I think we did a full episode on the podcast about it. But banks will, for like higher executives, they will get an insurance policy on, let's say, the vice president of such and such. I don't know. It doesn't matter. What they'll do then is they will fund that policy. They will borrow against the cash value to pay. A lot of times it's benefits. So whether it's the contributions to 401, it's health insurance, all the benefits that go with it. And they repay themselves. They continue to fund it. It continues to grow. Even if that executive leaves, doesn't matter. It's tied to the individual. But when that executive dies, let's see, they've retired for 20 years and then they die, the death benefit, the beneficiary of that policy is the bank. So the death benefit goes back to the bank, and they recoup a significantly greater amount than what they put out in terms of benefits over the course of that person's career. The death benefit continues to grow. Even if you have loans out, it continues to grow at a rate that will always exceed any amount of loan that you can take out. So it's substantially different. So let's say they paid out $1 million in death benefits over the course of someone's career. Chances are pretty good. It depends on a whole bunch of factors, but let's just say there's $5 million in death benefit. Well, I would trade $1 million for $5 million all day. So when that executive dies, the death benefit comes back to the bank or the business, whatever B word you want to choose, and they just continue to recycle that money. You can do it at a lower level like us with land. It's just it's not a matter of can IBC fit into what I'm doing. It's a matter of how. And that's the fun part, how Mike and I get to be involved. Um, so yeah, it's a personal bank. You get the control, liquidity, and usage. But big behemoths are doing it all over the place. And Mike's got a whole list. I don't know all the list, but um, a lot of big businesses are doing it exactly the way I just described. Um, I've gotten little long-winded. I put in here something about the real estate side of things because we buy and sell land. I've kind of alluded to it, so I'm going to skip over that. But really, I mean, the term bridge funding is out there. So you need funding to kind of bridge the gap. So maybe an investor doesn't want to go all in, it's always a good idea to have all investors have some skin in the game. We've certainly done deals where it's solely the investor and then they get a percentage of the cut after we do the work. But a lot of times, it'll be 50% us, 50% an investor. But to have that control, liquidity, and usage in my policies allows me to just, in 2 or 3 days have the money ready and we go buy the land and then we sell it, hopefully in a week or two. Money goes to the investor, they're real happy, and then we fund our policy back, put it back in, and it continues to grow. Um, so that bridge funding is great. The velocity of money, just rinse and repeat in that all the while that money stays there on the ledger. Um, you give that thing some time, and that velocity of money is going to get faster and faster and faster and faster. So jumping in here, so I want to always balance, and the articles did a fairly, I would say one in particular did a fairly good job of saying this is not a magic pill. It's not something that you can just go do and anybody and everybody should. I think everybody should, as long as there's specific parameters around it based on the risks and considerations that exist there. So one, it's an insurance policy. There are premiums. It takes Yvonne is famous for saying. So Yvonne is the vice president. I think her formal title is director of sales at Alpha Omega Wealth. She's been on the podcast, but she's famous for saying IBC policies are like jukeboxes. It takes money to play. So there are premium costs to that. In fact, I had a discussion this weekend with someone else, and they're like, I have a good amount of money. Let's use $50,000 sitting there. I think it was right around there, to be honest. What do I do? Can I put it in a policy? I said, we can certainly do a policy for $50,000. What you have to remember is that for at least a minimum of 4 years, so you put $50,000 in the next three subsequent years, you have to have $50,000 to go in on the anniversary date or over the entirety of those next years. So you need to have $200,000 for the next 4 years ready to go. And you can make that over that time, and that's not a big deal for you. A lot of people, it's not. For us, it would be. But if it's not for you, then you can consider more. The other consideration in the premium is the first year. If you build this on what I consider the most healthy platform, that's a 60-40 split between the base and the paid up additions. And that may not make a lot of sense if you're brand new to the podcast, but there's other podcasts we talk about that. But a 60-40 split, you can only leverage 60% of that cash value that first year. So if you put in $50,000, you're only able to leverage $30,000 using that specific example. So are you okay with not being able to leverage $20,000? You don't lose it. It stays on the ledger. You're just not able to leverage it in terms of borrowing against the cash value. So $50,000 is there. That's often a misnomer that exists in this. You don't lose $20,000. You're just not able to leverage the cash value of all $50,000. You only get 30. Next year, it's about 90% of your total premium. Third year is 98, and then the fourth year, you get about 104%. And then it just continues to grow. So get to about year 1920, you get about 200% return. So if I put $50,000 in that 20th year, I'm getting $100,000 I can go leverage in terms of cash value to go use. So it continues to grow. So that is a consideration. I wouldn't call it a risk. It's consideration in it. The next one is that there is interest that is a part of borrowing against the cash value. So I hear again all the time, one of the biggest complaints, how stupid is it that you have to pay to borrow your own money? And that's a very, very well stated statement if you don't have the entire context of what IBC does. And that, again, is the number one goal of this podcast. That money that you've put in there is continuing to make you money. What's often left out is that fact. yes, they charge you an interest rate to go use it. They need to continue to build the money that you've put in. The number one thing they consider, if this person wants to go use it, I know that I, I'm going to get that money back because either the policy lapse, which if you're my client, we've never let happen. There's a million things we can do to make sure that doesn't happen. But if you have a lesser client, and that may happen, or the person dies and all the debts are settled because there is a death benefit tied to it. So the insurance company will let you borrow against the cash value, but they have to grow that as well. But there is interest that's involved in that. So when you pay yourself back, you decrease that interest, you decrease the drag. Your money, though, all the while is continuing to make that contractual rate of return. So that's also often the part of it's left out, but it is a consideration. Again, not a risk. There's consistency there. So going back to Walt Disney, he knew he was going to pay 2% for every dollar he had out, but if he paid it back, he was still just paying 2% on what that was. Um, but there is interest in borrowing. Um, you, you 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 need a plan to do this. That's my next point in there. So that's where Mike and I come in. A lot of times, Mike more so than me because he's seen this so many times and has done so many things. He's very good at asking the correct questions to help someone know exactly what they're going to do with their policy moving forward. And that can change over time. It's not, the first year and then 10 years later, it's the exact same thing. It can change and should change, to be quite frank. But Mike is very good at having a plan. So that is a consideration as well. I would qualify that potentially as a risk if your plan isn't correct. Um, so let's say we get into the situation again where you put $50,000 in that first year, but you don't have the cash flow to do $50,000 again the second year. That is going to run you into some trouble. So you didn't have that plan from the onset. So maybe you could have done $20,000 or $20,000 policy and you have the cash flow to do $20,000. So start there. Get something on the ledger. Get that policy going to make sure you're insured so your loved ones are taken care of. But that plan is very important. So if you don't have a plan, I would qualify that as a risk. So that's something to consider as well. And the last one is how the policy is designed. This kind of goes back to Kyle Busch last week. If you listen to that, his was an IUL. I don't for 99% of the population, I would not recommend an IUL. Um, we build these on whole life policies, and there's lots of reasons we do that. But even within that context of a whole life policy, unless these are built correctly, they can go sideways real quickly. Experienced that with someone who did a policy through another firm, and as we talked, their statement was, "I just didn't know enough to ask the correct questions, and then I feel like I wasn't listened to because they have policies that don't necessarily meet their needs." So maybe you could even go back up to number one. It's a risk if you don't have a plan, but to talk that plan out, to have it designed, have the policy designed how you want it to be designed to do exactly what you want it to do is all part of the all-encompassing package that we need to put together. So that is a risk too. Make sure the person you're going with knows what they're talking about. Again, I've shared several times. I had someone who we were talking and I don't think it was a trust issue. They just wanted to talk to somebody else. So we got them in touch. It was a female, got her in touch with another female, someone I trust very much, and they're doing a policy together. I am happy to do that. Um, it just it would make me happy to know that you have the information that you need to make an informed decision. And if it's to go with IBC and you don't want to do it with me or Mike, we're just as happy as if you go get one with somebody else. And I got tons of people that do this very well and know what they're doing. But all that to say, the policy design matters, and I would say there's a risk that exists there too. Um, so talking about the legacy, so just kind of some broader concepts. I had the thought, I mean, had Walt Disney not leveraged his cash value, would there be a Disney World? I mean, Disney World, talk about a global brand. Had he not done that, I think Disney World's a big part of that. Certainly, he was doing other things, and they've made some wise decisions since the 1950s, obviously. But what would that look like? So, I know you playing the what if game is often a fool's errand, but I had that question: what would it look like? But he created uh, a legacy, and maybe not one that I would want for myself. It's not a bad thing. I would want my legacy to look a little bit different. It wouldn't be in cartoons. It would be, loving my family, leading them well according to biblical principles, things like that. Um, but what if? I think is a very valid question. Um, the other thought I had is, what does that policy now? I think Walt's dead. So if he was the insured, which I believe he was based on what I read, that policy has been long paid out. But I wonder if he did more. I didn't speak to any of this. How many did he do? Was he like the Rockefellers that kept building their family on these things so they can keep recycling the money? Um, my guess is he did something to that capacity. I don't know that. Um, but that policy, having it in place and then leveraging it and using it is exactly what we would hope for other people. So that's a cool thing. He built a legacy, and all the while, again, Lillian likely got paid out when Walt died. I just would be curious what that policy would look like, or how many policies did he have when he passed away. So been talking a lot. I guess that's what I do on the podcast. I'm excited to have Mike back, so I'm not just talking into a microphone. I wish someone was on here. If you want to come on the podcast, let's do it. But some key takeaways um, for this episode here. So life insurance is not just death benefit. My hope is if you've listened to enough of these episodes, that is maybe a goal we try and have. Life insurance is not just insuring your life. It can be leveraged to provide you things that banks provide you, but you get to be that bank and make the money banks would make off of you. Hence the term infinite banking concept. But life insurance is not just protection, it's a financial tool. It can be leveraged as a tool to help get you where you want. Mike always says it reverses the flow of money away from your family back to your family. I think that's a great way to put it. Um, another key takeaway: policy loans, just like Walt Disney did, are a great way to access capital without selling assets. So he didn't lose an asset; he just leveraged the value of that asset in his life insurance policy to go then do what he wanted to do that the banks would not give him permission to do. The banks were holding those doors closed. Um, Sometimes it's good to have other people to say no to you, but in this case, Walt was dreaming and he wanted to realize that dream and he wasn't going to let the bank stand in his way. So he leveraged his own asset to make that happen. So I think that's, maybe kind of proud of myself for this statement. But policy policy loans are a way to access capital without losing or selling an asset. So again, that policy remained in place. You pay it back, you're good to go. If he never pays it back, it's settled when the death benefit kicks out. But he didn't have to give up anything. He just borrowed against that cash value to go do with what he wanted to do in the first place. And as that Disney World made money, he paid it back and he was off and running. So the next key takeaway: this strategy supports growth and long-term stability. It is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is not. There are certainly other places that you can go make money faster. 100%. This is not an investment. This is it's a financial tool to reverse the flow of money away from your family and have your family recapture that and to continue to recycle. We're talking legacy. And if that is of interest to you, that's where I love talking with people. Oftentimes it's, well, I'm in a big hole. How can IBC help me get out of it? We can do that. I think Tim Schneider talked about, if you've listened to Tim's episode, being in debt and using IBC to get out of debt. He had a lot of medical debt on his son. If you haven't listened to that episode, it's a very powerful episode. I would recommend go do that. But they had a lot of debt. He was very, very disciplined in doing that. A lot of people in America aren't as disciplined as Tim. And I would not describe IBC as a get out of debt quickly thing. There are big talking heads that can help you with that. That is not this. In fact, that one of the specific big talking heads does not view IBC as a realistic catalyst to build legacy. And I would 100% disagree with him. Uh, he just gets crazy guys calling in, all getting all mad, and that's what he posts on his website. I've never seen an interview where he sits down with a financial expert, maybe even from the Nelson Nash Institute. I'll use them as an example. He will not do an interview with Nelson Nash Institute about why he thinks IBC is wrong versus what benefits it provides people. So I'm not going to say names. You very likely know who I'm talking about. Um, if you want to call or text me or email me, I'll tell you who it is. If you can't figure it out. But again, it's a long-term um, uh, practice that supports discipline, or that is supported by discipline, but will also grow steadily and contractually. And then the last thing on here, key takeaway. We kind of did Kyle Busch as maybe what not to do. Walt Disney is completely the extreme. He built an amusement park. So you likely would find yourself in the middle. But I guess I would encourage you to kind of start dreaming a little bit. Um, would it change buying a second home or an Airbnb? Would it change your mind if you put the $50,000 down on your new Airbnb, but you have it on the ledger and then you go leverage it, and as you rent your Airbnb out, you can pay your $50,000 loan back, but now you still have $50,000 on the ledger. You have an Airbnb that's cash flowing monthly. What that's all that's I think going to encourage you to do is continue that policy, growing it, or start a second policy to house all the money that you're making from your Airbnb. So I use that as an example. What would your dream look like if you knew you could capture and put on the ledger the money you're going to go spend on something, whether it's a boat? Um, I would encourage you to do something business related, something that's going to cash flow, but it doesn't have to. You certainly can do it on a home. Um, so if you're disciplined and you can build up cash value, so let's say $200,000, you can leverage that cash value and talk about a huge down payment on a house, $200,000 down, but instead of paying $2,000 a month back to um, a mortgage lender, you're going to pay yourself back the $2,000, probably at a lesser interest rate. But all the while, that $200,000 is still there making you dividends and interest. So, what would your dream look like? Maybe I'll leave you with that question. What would your dream look like if you knew you were able to capture the money you were going to go spend on that dream, and it would stay there making you money, and yet you got to still go realize your dream, just like Walt Disney did. So that we'll kind of end with that. Um, it's not a matter of if IBC can fit into what you're doing, it's how. And that's where the fun comes in. So Mike and I would love to talk with you about that. Again, it gets cooler and cooler the stories I get to hear about the ideas people have and what to do with this thing. So I'd love to hear your idea. Be the person that calls in. Don't sit and listen to this. Someone told me the other day, and we're getting past a little bit here in Michigan where I live, but they told me I loved listening to your podcast while I mowed the lawn. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. You're mowing every time you go to mow the lawn, my podcast is on your brain and you're listening to it. So I'll take that. But if we can be of help, we would love to. So don't be the person that just mows their lawn and listens to the podcast. Give us a call. Um, I I am how I am on the podcast in person too. I'd love to get to know you, get to meet you, hear your story. I will tell you this: I will do a lot less talking if you give me a call. I would much rather hear about you than be jibber jabbering into a microphone for 40 minutes. But do that. I would love to talk to you about how IBC can fit in to what you're doing. How can you realize your dream and start getting that flow of money back to your family? So email us, Dave at familybakingSolutions.com, Mike at familybakingSolutions.com. I'm not feeling it. The phone number 507-205-2284. I had to look this time. So I'm getting there, guys and gals. I'm getting there. But all of our socials are in the show notes. Again, I will put those resources in the show notes as well for Walt Disney's story. But as always, thanks for listening. Hopefully, I got a podcast scheduled with Mike this week, so hopefully he'll be on for next week's episode. Excited about that. And then he's got some cool things cooking. He set up at least one interview, if not two interviews, with some big wigs to talk about some cool things. So we got that coming for you as well. As we enter the holiday season, I do wish you a happy Thanksgiving. Well, I think we'll have another podcast out before then. Yeah, next Tuesday. So I'll wish you that again. But I pray that the next few weeks are enjoyable. I know they can be hard for a lot of people, but my prayer is that you find the joy in it. And if you find yourself wanting something to do, give us a call. Be happy to talk IBC with you. All right. Have a good one.